Well, it must have been a powerful argument for the UK government to grant refugee status to a son, basically a member of a ruling family in one of the former colonies. The basic problem is that in Singapore, especially under Lee Hsien Loong, Prime Minister, the second Prime Minister in the Lee family, there's been increasingly less distinction between the state and the family. I mean, when this dispute over the father's property, parents' property, the house, came into the fore, it wasn't. I mean, it was settled in the ordinary way, with the will, the reading of the will, etc. But then, when Lee Hsien Loong, the Prime Minister, wanted to do something different to what his father had wanted, he went to he went to the courts, he got prosecutions, he went to Parliament, he went to the cabinet. Now, Lee Hsien Yang, the younger brother, and his sister, who's just recently passed away, they were not members of Parliament, not members of cabinet, so they had no stake in it. Now, why on earth would a family dispute over a property be discussed in cabinet or in Parliament, unless there is no distinction between the family and the state?
So what sort of legal...
Yes,
so what sort of legal action is he facing if he does return to Singapore?
Well, there are outstanding charges against him which have never actually been presented and never actually been tested in a court. And I think that's important to remember. This is not an issue about the ethics of the court system, but about the prosecutorial system. And I mentioned the lack of distinction between the family and the state. The Attorney General the Attorney General in Singapore is not a political position, it's a state office, not elected at all. It is Lee Hsien Loong's former personal solicitor. That's how close symbiosis is between the state and the family. And really the family dominates the state, or has done, that could be changing.
Yes, the government in Singapore claims that, quote, he is free to return. How do you interpret that? Would he be taken in by authorities if he does?
Lee Hsien Yang is free to return to Singapore in the same way as a mouse is free to walk into the cat's cradle. The same way as Jerry might walk up to Tom in the cartoons. If he came in, once he's in, he'd never get out again. He'd be placing himself at the power of the state being wielded by the other member of the family. And it's as simple as that. And interestingly, it remains to be seen whether now that there's a new Prime Minister, Lee Hsien Loong is no longer Prime Minister, whether anything has changed. And I suspect it hasn't.
It is quite the family drama, isn't it, William? I mean, Lee Hsien Yang himself, his brother, was the Prime Minister, and so was his father. But Lee Hsien Yang himself was a Brigadier General, one of the highest rankings in the military. Yes. He was later the CEO of Singtel, which owns Optus here in Australia. And this feud has all got to do with the father's estate, as you mentioned. Where are things at with this dispute? And do you see that sort of playing out publicly still?
It's hard to see how it could be more public. What we're seeing is seeing a split in the family, and that's what it is. It is a split in the national elite. Lee Hsien Yang was a beneficiary of this system, of this cosy system, for all of his life until he fell out with his brother. And this is Lee Hsien Loong's options are now very limited. There's no way he can contest an election at any way. He can't get into Singapore to lodge a nomination. I think what we're going to see is the continued use of the Singapore prosecutorial system and the court system to keep trying to persecute, at least strip Lee Hsien Yang of his Singapore assets. I don't know, but I suspect that he has already moved most of his assets out of Singapore.
Yeah, and noting that he was...
That would have been a smart thing to do.
Yes, and noting, Michael, that he was also a member of the opposition at one stage. Now, do you think this might be problematic for relations between Singapore and the UK, at least in the short term?
I don't think that the Singapore government will let this get in the way. I mean, they have, especially under the father, Lee Kuan Yew, they built a reputation by poking the bear. And the bear included especially England, the UK. And this is despite the fact that Lee Hsien Yang and his father are both Anglophiles. They're both products of British universities and love the place. And as far back as the 1990s, Singapore cut itself completely off from the UK legal system, and that was done. It was an affront, but that was to deal with someone else who was causing trouble.
And do you think this reignited from Lee Hsien Yang's point of view because of the death of his sister Lee Wei Ling? Because the will did say that Lee Kuan Yew did say in his will that his estate should be demolished after she vacates the property. Of course, she has passed away quite recently.
That's very important in Singapore terms, and I'm sure it's very important to Lee Hsien Yang. It's hard to see how that would be very important to the UK government or the bodies processing applications for refugee status, unless, of course, they made the decision some time back, and now it's only just been made public by Lee Hsien Yang. So that's what has changed. So the news of it is the new thing, and that was in Lee Hsien Yang's hands to control. The actual issuing of refugee status happened some time back, as we now know. We didn't know that until yesterday.